everybody, and welcome to Epic Everyday, our weekday podcast for busy, overwhelmed Christians who don't want to stay in that place and instead want to find freedom and abundance and peace. I'm Liz Frerichs, and this is my husband, Evan.
Hi. What?
You're just sitting there. It's weird.
Just sitting here listening.
Yeah, but you're not like
I never want to be too distracting.
So today we're going to keep talking about the new year, and since it's Wednesday, we're going to talk about being centered.
Yeah.
Being centered is living out of the essence of who you are. So having your actions, your goals, all that stuff align with who God designed you to be.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to do some work to figure out who we are.
Yeah.
We have to do a little bit of digging. You'd think we might maybe just know, but actually I don't think we do until we really think about it.
Yeah. So I think there's two pieces. One is learned behaviors. Like sometimes I think, especially for people with a trauma background, but I think this applies to everybody. Sometimes we learn to act in ways that are not actually part of our character.
Sure, survival.
Self-defense.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I think this especially comes into play, well, I mean, for all the types, but one of the things that I was like, oh man, when we read the type 1 section, because type 1s like to be constantly moving and they like to be around people all the time. And one of our daughters is a type 1, and if she was in a regular public school, she would constantly be told that she needs to sit still.
Yeah, she'd be labeled hyperactive or ADHD probably.
Right. Actually, it was so freeing for me as a teacher and a parent to be like, oh, it's okay that I'm not, forcing her to sit still when she reads. Because when she was learning to read, she was like a monkey. And part of me was like, should I be teaching her that she needs to just sit quietly while she's practicing reading? But then when I learned she was a type 1, I was like, oh, no, I'm totally letting her be herself. It's fine.
Yeah. And now it's like, oh, she can't read unless she's hanging upside down from the rafters. She sits quietly and reads just fine.
Yes. Yeah.
It is hard, though, in the moment to be like, it doesn't seem like it's okay. And because we're so used to like, oh, here's how you do school. Here's how you learn. You just sit down and you shut up and you do your work.
Right. So I think we kind of have to stop and examine what things we do, what habits we have might be, past things that aren't actually part of who we are.
Yeah. I think one thing we also want to be aware of when we're, because ultimately, like when we're getting geared up for the year here, we're going to be trying to kind of predetermine and like we said, set that train track on course to get some certain things accomplished, right? So we're actually going to do some stuff. And if we're not intentional, we're just going to try to solve the problems that are right in front of our face all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And this is giving us a farther vision into what's actually important and what's actually, what kind of work am I supposed to be doing the way God made me? Am I supposed to just, oh, there's a problem, I'll do that. Oh, there's another problem, I'll just do that. And you're not going to be fulfilling your full potential, or being, this really great person that God designed you to be if you're just putting out fires all the time. So the motivation, it's giving us kind of more of a robust motivation, I think, to do meaningful tasks.
Totally.
Than this kind of shallow motivation of just like, what do I see around me? What had I better do? Oh, and just reacting to everything.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the difference between crisis management and risk management. If you're constantly in crisis management, you're just managing things like putting out this fire, putting out this fire, putting out this fire. Yeah. Versus risk management, you're looking ahead and saying, what do I want to accomplish? What might be some problems that might come up? How do I solve those before they happen? Yeah.
I think it comes down to our ultimate desire too. I mean, we want to glorify God with our actions and stuff. And I think when we're just doing crisis management, our biggest desire, as evidenced by our actions, is to just silence the noise a little bit.
Right.
And to just calm the heck down a little bit and to just kind of, I don't know, it's not a very big desire. It's just give me some peace and quiet for once.
Yeah, definitely. So I think when we're trying to figure out what it looks like to have goals from center, we have to start with what kind of life do you want? And kind of letting go of some of those false beliefs. That's sort of the second half of what I was saying earlier with the, sometimes we get into false ways of being based on our past, but we also can have these beliefs that keep us from being who we are designed to be.
Yeah.
So I had a friend that sent me a picture today that was of a horse that was tied to a patio chair.
Yeah.
Like a little plastic, and the horse could have picked it up in a second. Probably wouldn't have even noticed it, but the horse was there because it was tied to the patio chair.
Right. It thought it was tied. It thought it was stuck.
Right. And I mean, for me, when I learned that I was a type 4, it was so freeing. It was like, oh, because I had always dressed as a type 2 because my mother's a type 2 and because I considered that type 4 clothes were more, I don't know, just for other people.
Yeah, a little maybe too flashy or in
Right.
your face or fancy or something.
Even though I was like, oh, I love that.
Sure.
I never would have actually worn it
Yeah.
until I was like, oh, I'm a type 4. I'm allowed to wear that, So it was a mental thing for me. And there have been other things in my life like that, we can't, like we can only have a certain amount of money or we can only have a certain kind of job. That was actually one of the things that we did last year was sit down, maybe the year before last. Anyway, we sat down and we said, what kind of life do we want to have? And is your current job something that can get us there?
No.
I mean, we're not saying like, health and wealth, you can have whatever you want to. You're never going to have trouble.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, in this world, you're going to have trouble.
Well, and if you are like, okay, what kind of life do I want? And if all the stuff that comes up is like a private jet and a mansion, and I mean, we're talking about a true Christian's desire here to glorify God. And if we're glorifying God with every aspect of who we are, and we understand that we've been made a certain way, and I've made differently than you, so the things that I'm passionate about is appropriate, and the things that you're passionate about, even if I don't understand it, that's appropriate too, because we're different parts of the body, and we're chugging away, and God's orchestrating the whole show. Like that's the kind of what kind of life do I want? I want to be really effective, spiritually in the world.
Right.
That's what we're talking about defining here, not just like your dream vacation lifestyle in a Barbie mansion or something,
Yeah, although I do think that's part of it is recognizing, one of the things that we had talked about was that we both really want to travel and take our kids traveling. We want to have a job that allows for that, and we don't right now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there can be things like that are...
Well, but to what purpose, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, for us, it has to do with helping our children understand the world more and just loving learning about the way that God designed the world. Today, we are going to talk about some of the practical way to do this. J.B. Glossinger wrote a book called The Sacred Six, which if you haven't read it, go do it.
Yeah. And it's not sacred as in like Christian sacred.
No.
So it's not from a Christian perspective, but the principles and his methods he outlines are so useful. Yeah.
So you write down your mission, which he defines as the next experience you want to have. And it can be, like, for instance, my mission is, I should have grabbed it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But basically the idea is helping people find freedom, abundance, and peace, and being a mom, and participating with the Holy Spirit to build where he builds.
Yeah. And
continuing to build our business. So those are some of the things in my mission. I had the hardest time writing out my mission first. So for some people, they might find it more helpful to start with your values.
Yeah, I think that's what I started with. And it's nice. There's an index of like hundreds of these value words, like
right.
Freedom is a big one, or education, or whatever.
Surrender.
Yeah. there's hundreds of them. And then you just can read through the list and you can circle every single one if you want. But I mean, you're going to be paring it down to a top six. Yeah. And then you can write your mission from that. Trusting that, these are things that are important to me because that's how I'm made. I'm made to value this.
Right.
Because God values these things.
Yeah. When I wrote down my values, one of mine is helping people with trauma. And that's because that's in my past. And I adore getting to watch somebody actually work through their trauma pieces and then to live in that spacious place where they're not, where they're not like constraining what they do in case they get triggered, so that they can just move through life and do what God's called them to do. So there are pieces that are, unique, but then there are some things like surrender is one of mine, and that has to do with my faith and aligning with the way the Holy Spirit designed the world to work.
So once you get your mission and your values down.
And then from there, you pick your goals for the year.
Yeah, and I think this is the thing, like we hear about goal setting, I guess. It seems like a fair amount. And we want to just, I'm supposed to set goals? I just set goals. But these two steps before it are so important. So that we set goals that they're actually my goals.
Right.
Not just, because anybody can be like, the classic, like lose weight, exercise, eat better. But what are my values? How do I approach? Maybe I'll get to those things and maybe I'll get to something more important based on the kind of two steps that you do first.
Yeah, it's amazing when you actually take the time to do those things. And then with each goal, you're supposed to write down why that's a goal, which I think is so helpful. Yeah. Because not only does it then provide motivation for, maybe the days when you're like, do I really want to do this goal? You can go back and look at your why and say, oh yeah, this is really important. I'm passionate about this and here's why. And it also is another checks and balances to, is this my goal? Is this goal actually in line with, who I am and what's important to me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and we're submitting the whole process. I mean, you can pray through the whole process to the Holy Spirit because, we don't want to take on somebody else's goals for your life.
Right.
You just want to take on what the Holy Spirit wants you to do. I think, it's too easy to be like, oh, well, my mentor or my parents did it this way, and I guess that's just the right way to do it. But.
Right. Yeah, which it totally is not necessarily true.
Doesn't mean it's wrong for them to do it that way, because that may be in line with their values.
I'm still thinking about the lady that cuts the end off of her ham,
Yeah, because their oven's not big enough for a full ham.
Right, and then her daughter and granddaughter all cut the end off their ham because that's the way they were taught. That's how you make ham.
Yeah. Doesn't matter how big your oven is, you just cut the... Yeah.
Right, they just never understood why that was part of the process. And it wasn't until they were like, hey Mom, why do we cut the end off the ham? Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. That they were like, I don't actually need to do it that way. The last step of the process is after you've got your goals and your mission and your values and your why for your goals all written down, you break it up into projects. And so then you break those projects down into daily tasks, and you can then schedule your life, which is what we've done, so that every day you're getting closer to your goals. Yeah. It's that railroad track where okay, one of my daily tasks is I edit 2,000 words on my novel right now. And I just do that every day.
Right.
And eventually, hopefully, someday, I'll get to the end,
Right, and so then, you're not biting off more than you can chew. You're not like, I've got to edit my novel by the end of the month, and you're like, oh gosh, that's never happening.
Right.
But it's actually and then there's a little win each day. That's what we want to accomplish something each day and to understand what we accomplished.
Right. Yeah, I love that. That's part of my journal is writing down my daily wins, and I love the way the Sacred Six works because I only ever have 6 things on my to-do list. And at the end of the day, when I write down my daily wins, I'm like, oh, look, I got all my 6 things done. And maybe, a couple of other things that were
probably bonus.
Mm-hmm. And so it makes me feel like I'm a rock star every day, which is awesome.
You are a rock star.
Thanks. And it's all stuff that is important to me.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. I'm looking forward to getting into it this year. More and more. I'm a little bit of a more, less enthusiastic about it. But I do see the value, and I am excited about it.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome.
We'll do it together, listeners.
Yes. Well, we are going to cover this in our class. So if you're interested in having somebody go over all this stuff with you step by step, you can always join us in our class. All right. We love you guys, and we are praying for you. Thanks to everybody that's been sharing the show. If you have found this podcast helpful, please do continue to share the show. Come back tomorrow, and we're going to keep talking about the new year and setting up our railroad tracks and being connected.
Sounds good. See you then.
It's going to be awesome. See you later.